Secure attachment. This is the foundation that attachment theory points toward as the healthiest starting place for relationships. People with a secure attachment style generally feel comfortable with closeness, are not thrown into panic when someone needs space, and trust that the people they love will return. It develops in early childhood when a caregiver is consistently responsive, not perfect, but reliably present and attuned. The child learns through repeated experience that the world is basically safe and that other people can be trusted. That internal sense of safety tends to travel into adult relationships, making it easier to communicate openly, handle conflict without catastrophizing, and feel settled within a partnership rather than constantly scanning for signs of threat. Anxious attachment. When early caregiving was inconsistent, warm and attentive sometimes, distant or preoccupied at others, a child could never quite predict what they would get. The response to that unpredictability was often to turn up the volume on attachment signals, to cry louder, cling harder, and stay alert for any sign that connection might be slipping away. In adulthood, that same pattern tends to resurface in romantic relationships. People with anxious attachment often crave a great deal of reassurance, read deeply into small changes in a partner's behavior, and feel a persistent low-level worry that they are not loved as much as they love. The fear is not irrational to them. It is an old and well-practiced response to a world that once felt unpredictable. Avoidant attachment. Some children learned a different lesson from early experience. When reaching out for comfort was consistently met with dismissal, irritation, or emotional unavailability, the most adaptive response was to stop reaching. To become self-sufficient, to need less or at least appear to. Adults with avoidant attachment often value independence strongly, feel uncomfortable when relationships become very close or emotionally intense, and tend to pull back when a partner wants more intimacy. It is not that they do not feel. Research suggests they feel just as much as anyone else, but they have learned to suppress those feelings and distrust the idea that another person can reliably meet their needs. Disorganized attachment. This style carries the most complexity and tends to emerge from the most difficult early experiences. When a caregiver was not just inconsistent but frightening, through abuse, severe neglect, or profound unpredictability, the child faced an impossible situation. The person who was supposed to be the source of safety was also the source of fear. There was no coherent strategy that worked. In adult relationships, this often shows up as a deep conflict between wanting closeness and being afraid of it simultaneously. A person might pursue connection intensely and then push it away just as hard. Disorganized attachment is associated with the most significant relational difficulties, though it is also something that can shift meaningfully with the right support and healing. Fearful-Avoidant Attachment. This is sometimes described as a variation within the disorganized category, though many researchers treat it as its own distinct pattern. It shares the core tension, wanting intimacy but fearing it, but tends to manifest in people who are more aware of the conflict within themselves. They often recognize that they want close relationships, can articulate that desire, and yet find themselves either pulling back just as things get meaningful or choosing partners who maintain a certain emotional distance. The push and pull can be exhausting for both the person experiencing it and for those who care about them. It is a style that often develops in adolescence or early adulthood, when attachment wounds from childhood intersect with romantic experience. Dismissive-Avoidant Attachment. Where the fearful-avoidant person is often aware of their longing for connection, the dismissive-avoidant tends not to be. People with this pattern have often internalized a strong narrative of self-sufficiency. Relationships are fine, but they do not really need them. They may describe past partners as too needy, too emotional, or too dependent, without fully recognizing their own role in creating distance. John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist who first developed attachment theory in the 1960s, observed that the deactivation of attachment needs was a survival strategy, not a character flaw. Understanding that distinction matters, both for people who live with this pattern and for those who love them. Insecure attachment. Not everyone who arrives at a secure attachment style started there. Some people grew up with difficult or inconsistent caregiving, accumulated real relational wounds, and yet through therapy, deeply reparative relationships, or sustained personal work, developed the capacity to relate in secure ways. This is called earned secure attachment, and its existence is one of the more hopeful findings in the field. It demonstrates that the patterns formed in childhood are not fixed. The brain remains capable of learning new relational templates. People who have earned their security often bring a particular depth of empathy to relationships, having known what insecurity feels like from the inside. Attachment in friendships. Most of the conversation around attachment styles focuses on romantic relationships, but the same patterns show up in close friendships too. An anxiously attached person may feel the same spike of worry when a close friend takes a few days to reply to a message. An avoidantly attached person may keep friendships pleasant but carefully surface level, never quite allowing the kind of vulnerability that turns acquaintance into genuine closeness. Recognizing attachment patterns outside of romance can be just as revealing, because friendships often carry less intensity and pressure, which sometimes makes the underlying patterns easier to see clearly. How attachment styles interact. Two people do not simply bring their individual styles into a relationship, they create a dynamic together. One of the most studied pairings is the anxious-avoidant cycle, where the anxiously attached partner's bids for closeness trigger the avoidant partner's instinct to withdraw, which in turn intensifies the anxious partner's pursuit, which deepens the avoidant partner's retreat. Neither person is the villain. Both are responding from deeply ingrained patterns, often without realizing it. Understanding the cycle as a system, rather than a character flaw in one person, is often the first step toward interrupting it. Attachment theory does not offer easy answers, but it gives people a language for something they have often felt but struggled to explain.